Welcome to the first devlog for Gullywasher. I'm the dev Foster Turtle, but you can call me Foster. Gullywasher is a story-driven Metroidvania centered around a sparrow named Finch and her quest to uncover the secrets of her new home, the rain-soaked forest floors of Arava. I've been working on game development as a pastime hobby for about 6 months now, and decided it was time to finally sit down and build out a bigger game, one that I would want to sink time into myself. Recently, most of my gaming time has gone to indie titles, with one notable exception. I wanted to create a game with the same intrigue and discovery of the games that had captured my imagination, and in some cases, changed the way that I looked at the world. The primary inspiration for Gullywasher is Hollow Knight. If you like Metroidvanias, heck, if you like indie games, you know Hollow Knight to be a hand-painted epic that sprawls across the underground, bug-infested world of Hallow Nest. Hollow Knight captured my imagination in a way that no other game ever had, until I played Breath of the Wild a few months ago. Breath of the Wild's non-linear storytelling, tight movement system, and unique engine build out a believable world for the player to explore, and ultimately get lost in. The game is built in a manner that encourages exploration beyond the markers set on a map, or the side quests handed to you by NPCs, although if that's what you're into, it's got you covered there too. A Short Hike, Celeste, and Spiritfarer are a few other notable examples of the long list of games that inspired me to finally sit down and make Gullywasher. Awesome, we've decided to make a game and we've got a bunch of games we like. Well, crap. How do we get started on a game this big? Fittingly, a saying my dad used to tell me when I felt overwhelmed with schoolwork came to mind. Just take it bird by bird. After putting in some work and building out an overarching story with some key characters, I decided a majority of my early work on the game needed to be focused on two pursuits: building a distinct visual identity and the movement mechanics for Finch. While I know most devs' processes focus on completing the mechanics and then building an art style around them, I've found an approach similar to Vimlark's works best for me. I stay far more motivated if I simultaneously pour my time into design and function and then watch them grow together. To create a unique visual identity, I started by pulling a color palette off of lowspec.com. I went to search for the palette again while working on this video, but could not find it even with targeted searches. If anyone knows who the original creator was, please drop it in the comments below so that I can credit them in a future video. Anyone who has ever tried their hand at art knows how difficult getting color right can be, and I have a huge amount of respect for the creators who understand color theory enough to create their own color palettes. If you're struggling with your own art or want to make it stand out in some way, building off of a strong color palette is always the place that I start. That said, while I absolutely love the color palette that I settled on, it did not fit the tone I was going for, so I desaturated the entire color palette by 50%. It was a good compromise, as I was able to maintain the palette that I wanted to use, but also stay consistent with the vision I had for the atmosphere of Gullywasher. If you ask most devs or artists who work with devs, designing your central character first is a good place to start. Once you have a character design that you're pleased with, you can build the rest of the world in a similar style. In turn, this can help maintain consistency across the visual design of your game. Finch's character design is fairly simple, motivated by two goals. The first goal, I need her to stand out amongst the other things happening on screen so that the player can easily find where they are at any given time. To do this, I cranked the saturation on Finch's colors back up, creating more vibrant tones to draw the player's eye. The largest visual distinctions are the bandages on Finch's wings. They serve a story purpose, but are also the only place the color white appears on screen. At any point, the player should be able to ground themselves in the scene by finding Finch's wings. This will be important as they explore dangerous areas with precise combat and platforming challenges. The second goal I needed to fulfill was character-based. I wanted Finch to be cute, a small bird that the player could empathize with. I wanted the player to root for Finch and intern themselves on this adventure. Think of the thought process put into the character designs for Stella from Spiritfarer and Claire from A Short Hike. I'm pleased with the design that I settled on, and I think it'll serve both purposes fairly well. The second design element I wanted to cover is the world that your character is put in. Breaking down design choices for everything I've done so far would be tedious and would probably get a bit boring for you, so I have 3 tips to share. The first, and I can't emphasize this enough, if you're making your own game art, or any art for that matter, use reference. Reference is an important part of the design process, and the more you lean into your reference, the stronger your art will be. For every drawing I did, I started by pulling up a reference picture on my phone, or loading one onto my drawing software. The second tip is lean into strong shape language. This means the silhouettes on your drawing should be distinct. If the silhouette is distinct, the drawing will be a lot stronger. Creating visually interesting elements in the design that make it recognizable even when you squint or see it from a distance. Use this for character, use this for backgrounds, use it for everything. I'm not an expert on this at all, but I'm really pleased with how this turned out so far for Gullywasher. The third tip, make motivated design decisions. Why are you making something look a certain way? Does it serve story, in-game mechanics, or character? I catch myself overlooking this one a lot. I'll create something that I'm proud of, but that doesn't fit the overall design language of the game, so I have to scrap it. Create things using motivated design decisions. After an exploration of design choices, I think we're prepped for an equally dense exploration of movement mechanics. I'm not going to cover the combat system yet, as it will make more sense to explain those decisions once enemies are implemented into the game. Movement mechanics are a staple of almost all exploration-based games. It's vital to fine-tune these mechanics to meet your goals, and make it intuitive and easy to control the player character. Imagine if in Pokemon, you never received the running shoes or the bicycle. Exploration in those games would slow to a crawl and deter the player from exploring the world. For Gullywasher, I wanted the left and right movement of the player to be paced reasonably, not so slow that it would frustrate the player, but slow enough that the player had a reasonable amount of control at all times. Time between player input and character execution should be as low as possible. To achieve this effect, the acceleration and deceleration of the player are set very high. For the player jump, I love the amount of control the player has when jumping in Hollow Knight. The jump allows for precise platforming and the ability to avoid most enemy attacks. If an enemy hit lands on the player, it should be due to player error and not input latency or slow controls. You want the player to walk away saying, "Man, I could have avoided that. What if next time I tried this instead?" As opposed to, "I swear I pressed the button, but the game just didn't respond fast enough." For this reason, I've modeled the player jump in Gullywasher similarly. The longer you hold the space bar, the higher you jump, until you reach the peak of Finch's jump height. Universal gravity is also set higher, so that the player can fall at a faster rate than normal to avoid obstacles and enemies quickly. Finally, I've added 2 additional movement mechanics to the game to expand the possibilities for level design and create a more fluid movement system for the player. I'm planning on adding a third, but have not settled on another mechanic yet. Finch can now climb the stalks of plants, flagpoles, or thin support structures. This was inspired by Sparrow's actual behaviors. If you've ever seen a small bird grab onto a particularly vertical branch and just chill there for a moment, you know what I'm talking about. Finch's ability to climb should open up more possibilities for vertical level design. Need to get to a ledge above the rest of the level? No problem, a plant is growing from the forest floor below. Want to give the player vertical agency as they explore a small farm? No problem, there's a flagpole by the house. The second movement mechanic is the glide, inspired by games like Breath of the Wild, Spiritfarer, and A Short Hike. The glide will not be an initial ability, but rather discoverable as you explore the world and find new places. Once you obtain it, it will also allow you to reach places you couldn't before, like any good movement ability in a Metroidvania. Plummeting towards the ground after a jump is great, but allowing the player to slow their descent and gain more control should create more precise platforming and combat. Sensing a pattern yet? To incentivize using the glide and give it additional functionality, the maximum player speed is increased while gliding. I settled on this for 2 reasons. First, it felt much more natural when testing it. Gliding at the same pace you run just doesn't make that much sense. Second, and more importantly, it gives the player a way to navigate their environment more quickly, trading in speed for control. In a Metroidvania, inevitably you'll have to backtrack. Giving the player a means to speed up that process is crucial to maintaining their engagement. I'd like to implement a third, additional movement mechanic into the game to give the player more agency and control. I've been struggling on settling on a mechanic that meshes with the other 2 that I've implemented. I've considered a dash reminiscent of Mega Man, Celeste, and Hollow Knight, but I'm uncertain that's the direction that I want to go. The climb and the glide work together. For example, you can climb to a higher point to increase your glide distance. If you have any ideas on a new movement mechanic to implement, drop it in the comments below and I'll check out your suggestion. To touch on the final design element that fits somewhere between visual design and game mechanics, it's important to nail your camera movement. Whether making a 2D or a 3D game, the camera is the lens which the player views the world through, and having a good camera system can elevate a player's experience. I spent a lot of time trying to create a fluid camera and settled on one that follows the player using linear interpolation, while the player is within certain bounds. Linear interpolation allows the camera to transition smoothly between following the player and coming to a stop, so that the camera movements feel less abrupt. If you're interested in using it, most engines have a built-in linear interpolation function labeled as LERP or LERP. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, let me know. This took way longer than I expected, and I have a huge amount of respect for the devs who crank out devlogs on a regular basis. If you're interested in finding some other devs, check out PatchQuest, BenBonk, DevDuck, Vimlark, or Thomas Brush. They're creating some awesome games that I personally can't wait to play. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, stay positive, keep creating, and remember that you have something valuable that you can share with the world.